I've set you up on Tinder. What? I've set you up on Tinder. What?
Richard Joe.
Then is actually something that's quite good for Boeing. We'll probably see more deals going forward. We have the Paris Air Show in about 2 weeks. That's traditional a venue where Airbus reigns supreme, but you should expect Boeing to walk away with some deals there. We might get more out of the Middle East. We're hearing some companies are still in buying mode. So they're not done yet, and that will be good news for Boeing, which is why you're seeing these upgrades.
Got it. Benny, thanks so much for joining us. Bloomberg's Benedict Campbell leads our global aviation coverage out of Berlin. And Katie, you've been pretty excited about Boeing for at least, I'm going to say at least a year, as long as this show's been
a year. As long as we have been talking intensely every single day. I'm interested in Boeing just because it feels like one of those things that are too big to fail. How could the U.S. government let Boeing fail? We're obviously not anywhere close to that.
It feels almost like a state-owned company.
A little bit. You could make that argument. I wanted to take a look at Boeing shares year to date because they're up 17% on a total return basis. You compare that to the S&P 500, which is pretty much flat. Of course, the obvious pushback is that you just zoom out a little bit. Boeing falling 32% in 2024, but still, the rebound year to date is remarkable.
I mean, I pull out 5 years. I always default to that because of the comp function on the Bloomberg, and they're up double that over 5 years, so 35%. The interesting thing is that you see a bigger drop. Sorry, I have Air France. I put Air France here.
Air France. You meant Airbus.
I meant Airbus, yes. If you look at Airbus over the same period, it's up 172%. So they're doing a little bit better. There's two plane makers essentially in the world, and Airbus is crushing it.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. Last year, the pair trade was Boeing, short Boeing, long Airbus, because Airbus rose about 10%. But we'll continue to track Boeing, whether or not Matt likes it, because I think it's fascinating.
I just love talking to my buddy, Benedict Campbell, and I wish we could get Guy Johnson on this show. That would be a real coup if we could book him.
He's booked, he's busy.
Yeah. Coming up, RBC just raised its S&P target. Will Citi's Stuart Kaiser do the same? We'll put him on the spot and ask him that question live on internationally broadcast television. This is Open Interest.
Good morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia, we'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
Middle East and Africa. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. Join me on Horizons Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insights from this exciting region. Now weekdays, only on Bloomberg.
From the beating heart of global finance, economics, and politics, and wherever newsmakers are moving markets, Bloomberg brings you conversations that allow for deep discussions and important insights. What do you think the future is for inflation? Is this a new normal? Are markets too optimistic? How do you worry about the things that are outside your control? How does the current fighting completely stop? I'm Francine Lacqua, and this is The Pulse, every weekday only on Bloomberg.
Bloomberg brings you breaking news 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 3,000 journalists and analysts in more than 100 bureaus across the globe. Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
Welcome back to Open Interest. And RBC strategists have raised their year-end target for the S&P 500. The team, led by Lori Calvasina, now sees the index at 5730 by 2026. That's still about 3% below the benchmark's close on Friday, but a raise nonetheless. Let's discuss, because joining us at the desk is Citi Head of U.S. Equity Trading Strategy, Stuart Kaiser. Stuart, we said that we would ask you if you would raise your target. We have since learned that you don't formally have a target.
Or informally.
But if you did, would you be raising it right now? How do you feel?
I mean, I think from our perspective, you're still about 50-50 on recession risk. So, chasing the market here from a price target perspective, I think is just, you could be kind of cutting it again, very quickly. And I think, honestly, that's the big debate going on in the markets right now is what are the odds of recession? If we do get that recession, you're going to need earnings considerably lower from an estimate perspective. And that's probably going to drag targets a little bit lower. If we're able to skip past this recession like we have for the last 2 or 3 years, then, yeah, I think these higher targets are going to make a lot of sense. So I think you're really taking a view on a recession, which, you probably put as a toss-up right now to begin with.
I was looking at the top of your note, which I'm guessing you published before Donald Trump spoke on Friday. Because you said just when the tariff headlines fade away, we worry about, the national debt. And now we have tariff headlines back as well. So can't you raise those odds a little bit on recession?
Well, we joke, Donald Trump has made weekends interesting again, right? A lot of people want to own those Monday straddles ahead of a Trump weekend just to avoid the headline news. It's a tough call on that. I think our view had been, unless you get tariffs resolved relatively quickly, then the kind of cumulative impact of an uncertainty shock and fiscal restraint, et cetera, does significantly raise recession risk. So yeah, I think the longer this stuff persists, then clearly you have to discount a higher odds of recession the longer this stuff goes on. All
right, Stuart, you're going to stick with us. We're going to come back with the opening bell. As futures fall this morning, as Katie pointed out, it was a pretty banner May. The best May since 1990. We're back with the start of trade.
And Davos, you were asking a question of President Trump, and he didn't quite answer the question, and he asked you a question. So the question he asked you was something like, why are you not banking certain groups? What is the answer? I don't think he gave you a chance to really answer that question, but what is the answer to that question?
Well, first off, the Bank of America has 70 million consumer customers and millions of small businesses all over the country, all over the world. And so we bank everybody. But the real question was about overregulation, frankly. And so as you look at what's happened is because the interpretations of AML, Anti-Money Laundering, BSA, Bank Secrecy Act, KYC, know your customer's customer. There's a lot of burden upon the banking system to both report suspicious activity reports and do a lot of analysis, and we have to close accounts, so we can't tell people why we did it. And often we're told by authorities to close accounts. That creates confusion. Another area comes up in this discussion is in the crypto area where the regulator said you can't bank crypto operating companies, employees of crypto companies, et cetera. We are allowed to do, we bank everybody, but the operating company, they said that's a high-risk activity, ask us for authority, and guess what? You would have never gotten the authority. So that came up as an issue. So at the end of the day, it's about getting these regulations right.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg Television.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news wherever and whenever it happens. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and this is Bloomberg.
We are moments away from the first day of trading in the month of June. This is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. Looks like we're going to kick it off on a negative note, a little bit of a drop in futures. Not too bad, 0.3% on S&P futures, 0.5% on NASDAQ futures. After the U.S.-China trade war kind of reignites and Donald Trump doubles tariffs on steel and aluminum, that's pretty good considering. Take a look at the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. That guy's super psyched. Diamond Rock Hospitality celebrating their 20-year anniversary. They've been listed for 20 years. And the stock is up 32%. I feel like they can do better. Down at the NASDAQ, you have Charles River Associates. They're celebrating 60 years. I didn't go that far back, but over the last 4, they're up 400%. So they are absolutely crushing it. And I guess signing the opening bell at the NASDAQ. Katie's looking at some stocks that are moving pretty big on those tariffs I mentioned. What do you got?
Absolutely. Let me tell you about them. We're keeping an eye on aluminum and steel stocks, of course. They're moving mostly to the upside after Trump said he would double the tariffs on those metals to 50%. That is in an effort to aid the Nippon U.S. Steel deal, according to the president. Let's take a look at the fallout right here. You have U.S. Steel actually down a little bit right now. That has some idiosyncratic factors going on. So you take a look at Nucor and Cleveland Cliffs, both up in a big way. Nucor, 11%. Cleveland Cliffs, even better, Matt, soaring right now, up 23% at the open.
All right, let's get to that's the steel news, and there are a lot of moves there, but also, and bigger, moves in healthcare. Bristol Myers Squibb is going to pay BioNTech $11 billion to license its next-generation cancer drug. Sanofi is buying U.S.-based Blueprint Medicines in a $9 billion deal. That's also an immunology company. And then Moderna is doing something with COVID. We are back with... Wait, that was it? We're not gonna...
That was it.
I thought... Oh, okay. I thought it was introing... We're gonna get
Don't worry, it's coming up.
We'll get to Sam Fazeli in a little bit out of our Chicago bureau. We're back, though, with Citi head of U.S. equity trading strategy, Stuart Kaiser. So I guess we're talking about a couple of sectors here, which gives me an opening to ask you what sectors you like. If I have $1 million and come to you, where would you put it?
I think from our perspective, we still like the safety of large cap growth, so we still want some tech and comm services exposure. And the second to that, I think
Mag 7.
Yeah, Mag 7-ish. Maybe you go down, cap structure a little bit, just given the size of the moves in that space recently. And then banks. I think banks is an area where people still want to be engaged. All the deals you're announcing is exactly what investors were hoping for at the beginning of the year. If they do roll back SLR and give banks a little bit of an opportunity to expand balance sheet, I think that should be incrementally positive as well. And that's been about 12 months. It was actually right around this time last year where that banks trade kind of kicked off, mostly from a deregulation angle. Now we're getting into the deal calendar, hopefully. So that's an area where we'd like to have exposure as well.
Okay, well, let's say I needed to fund those positions somehow. That $1 million that I wanted to put into large caps and into banks. Say I had to take it out of a certain sector. Where would you do that right now?
That's the tougher call. I think that's a pretty nuanced trade at this point. I think you still want to be very careful with tariff risk. So things like consumer durables and apparels, I think, which have a lot of that tariff risk, I think you need to be careful with. Energy does seem to be continually a source of funds, particularly given, Trump's motivation to keep oil prices low. So those are probably two areas where we're a little more cautious. I would have told you healthcare, but once you get these deals kicking off, I think you want to be a little bit careful with the deal risk in healthcare. But that was obviously one of the worst performers last month as well, because it's been just a regulatory waterfall on that space. If you talk to PMs in the space, every time they think the stuff's fully priced in, you kind of get more news. But again, once you get deals being announced, I think you want to be very careful, especially in mid-cap biotech.
It's interesting to hear you say that on healthcare, because that was one of the bull cases coming into this year for the industry in 2025. And you saw a little bit of that in January pre-inauguration with Johnson & Johnson, for example.
Intracellular.
Exactly. Yeah. Then it was put on ice for a couple months now. Maybe it's coming back.
Yeah, we're starting, now we see another $20 billion in deals. That was, I think, $15 billion. I thought you were going to say you fund these things like the double line way, right? Shorting 30-year treasuries.
You could, I suppose.
And that raises, I think, a real concern. We're not there yet. Shanali's chomping at the bit for long yields to get out of control. But we're at 5% on the 30, right? 4.5 on the 10-year. Are you watching this closely? Are you worried that they may rise too much when everyone realizes we are spending way more money than we take in?
Definitely very, very, very concerned about it. I mean, we definitely saw real money kind of step in around 5 to 5.1% to kind of buy 30 years. But I think you have two risks here. One, you have just sort of a global spillover risk, which is if you get longer-term yields to dislocate in Germany and in Japan, that can just force U.S. yields sort of mechanically higher. And the second is once we get this budget deal announced, it's not going to, quote-unquote, score well from the CBO, and you could get pressure to the upside there. And I think incrementally what you worry about, clearly you have a supply-demand issue, but also you just have a lack of tools in the toolbox right now from both the Fed and the Treasury to really address this other than with languaging. So they're going to try to push back as much as they can verbally, but if they really need to step in, you're talking things like QE or pulling 20-year bond auctions, which we think are kind of last resort type situations. So you have a spillover issue, you have a budget issue, and I think you have a how do they deal with this if it actually happens issue.
You know, on this topic, there was an interesting note out from David Kostin at Goldman, I believe your former boss, who wrote that many investors point to 5% nominal yields as sort of a danger zone, a tipping point for stocks.
On the 10-year.
Yes, on the 10-year. He writes that we are less convinced, saying that it's more about the drivers and the rate of change rather than a specific level when it comes to yields. I'm wondering where you fall on that question. I mean, do you have a level in mind, or are you also focusing to the changes and the speed of them?
It's the speed of the change, and to David's point, it's what gets you there. You know, if you're at 5% because U.S. growth surprised us to the upside and it looks like we're getting a true soft landing, then yeah, clearly 5% is not going to matter too much to equity investors. If this is a supply-demand issue or an inflation issue, that's a completely different discussion. So yeah, I don't think obviously, it's interesting, and we do it too. Like whenever you come up with a key level, it always happens to be a big round number as well, right? It's always a 4.5 or a 5. I think David's spot on though. It's the rate of change, and I think most importantly, what is getting you to 5% is based on how equities are going to respond. You know, the fact is May was the best equity versus bond month in about 3.5 years since October 2022. Is that sustainable? You know, can equities continue to rally as bonds sell off? Our view would be yes, if it's growth driven. If it is inflation or sort of systematic risk driven, then no, then you're in a different story.
All right, Stuart, it's always great to see you. Great to kick off the second half of this year with you. That is Citi's Stuart Kaiser. And let's take a check on how this market is faring on the first trading day of the month of the second half. You can see the S&P 500 is down very slightly when it comes to the overall benchmark, but breadth is in the toilet right now. You only have 86, 87 names in the green right now. A lot of movement to the downside with more than 400 names in the red. You take a look at what's working right now. You do have NVIDIA higher. That's helping this benchmark. The same with Broadcom, Meta, Apple, United Health Group. But then you take a look at what's weighing on the benchmark. It's Alphabet, it's MasterCard, it's Johnson & Johnson, all some of your biggest decliners right now. So let's take a look at the sector level as well and break it down that way. You can see this poor breadth when you take a look at the bars as well. You have energy and tech gaining right now, but then you take a look at the bottom and it's a sea of red. You have real estate and financials at the bottom. You also have healthcare in the red, middle of the pack right here. And I think that's really interesting because if you click into that, you can see some of these deals news names that we've been talking about so far this morning. I go straight to Moderna, for example, getting FDA approval for a narrow group of patients for a new COVID drug. And then you have Bristol Myers Squibb, of course, up 0.7% right now. So let's zoom in a little bit more on that because they announced this morning a licensing deal with BioNTech, and we're going to discuss that now with Sam Fazeli of Bloomberg Intelligence. And let's go there. This is a conversation, Sam, we were having at the start of the hour about how it seems like cancer is really the hot area when it comes to these health industry deals right now. Would you expect to see more of the same?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, I'm in Chicago for the largest cancer conference that comes around once a year. And frankly, you see some of the evidence and the data that's coming out. And I've been bullish about cancer in general in terms of treatments that are coming along for quite a while now, because pretty much at every conference we get a big step change or practice changing data. And here, the deal that you've just seen Bristol Myers do with BioNTech is on a new asset class, And interestingly, a whole bunch of those assets are just coming out of China. No one else has been developing them in Europe, US. And it's a new asset class that could, I want to emphasize could, revolutionize the treatment and immunotherapy again over the next 5 to 10 years. Could, not will.
So, by the way, do you think we're going to see more big deals? We were talking, Sam, about the fact that it looked pretty cold. I mean, we did see J&J Intracellular at the beginning of the year, but it looked pretty cold after that. And now we've seen $20 billion in one day, potentially more, potentially less, but around that. Is it going to start heating up, or is this just that, you know, Chinese treatment, BNT 327, that's kind of making waves?
Right. No, so it's partly that. The Sanofi deal that you've just been talking about also, that is not to do with oncology, that's immunology. That's what Sanofi believes is a key area that it wants to focus on, and I agree with them. Immunology, your immune system, touches pretty much every disease that there's out there. Now, the thing is, the sector started off excited, and then we had the administration come in with a whole bunch of issues that they brought up that are negative. I think your previous guest spoke about it, that just gave people pause. I've banker friends who say, look, we had a big book of M&A deals at the beginning of the year, and it all just kind of stalled because of this. Is this a restart of that?
De skal bli, alle sammen skal bli reinstallert
My colleague Dwayne Wright in Washington said,
på samme kurs.
We might hear about that most favored nation or the tariffs. And that's the thing that we're going to have to, or more about them at least, that we're going to have to worry about that suddenly again putting a halt on people being enthusiastic about deals.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of folks sort of holding their breath when it comes to more tariff details there. I do want to talk a little bit about Moderna because shares are rising this morning, which it feels like is pretty rare to see. The reason why is because Moderna wanted narrower U.S. approval for a new COVID vaccine, sort of limiting the new approvals to folks who have some underlying risk factors, which is different than previous approval. And you can, again, see shares rising. But Sam, this is a real question, not flippant, but how many people are actually still getting vaccinated for COVID?
Yeah, so with all the questions that are being thrown at vaccines by some people in the administration, I think you have to worry that when it comes to actually people taking the shots in their arms, remember, vaccines are useless unless they're actually administered, right? People getting them shots in the arms, I'm a bit worried for going into that season. The narrower approval is as expected. I think the reason Moderna is up is because the approval came on the day that it was expected, or at least the last day that it could have come by. And so it shows that the administration and the FDA are still doing their job in terms of getting things approved. But what you need is the push to get people to go and get them. Not push necessarily, but the encouragement. I mean, it is a personal choice, but vaccines only
Jeg presiserer, dere må sende til support. De ikke på chatten, liksom. Hvis det noe kødd, så skriv til support, så får de fikse det fort som faen.
Then I'm going to get COVID.
There you go.
Sam.
It doesn't help our issue in that one of the things you want to do here is reduce hospitalizations. You need a lot of people to take them to really get that benefit.
All right. Appreciate the PSA. Sam Fazeli there at Bloomberg Intelligence talking mostly about cancer drugs, and we're hopeful there, but some about COVID. Coming up, Stars setting out on its own and impressing in its first quarterly report. Jeffrey Hirsch, the CEO, joins us next. This is Bloomberg.
Hello, Sahar. Rekruttert deg. Hvem har gjort det, Nico? Hvem har sagt det?
I'm Alex Rodriguez. And I'm Jason Kelly. And we're back with more episodes of our show, The Deal.
The theme of this season,
On the Road. we're bringing you more behind-the-scenes conversations with the biggest names in sports, business, and culture, like Melody Hobson.
I started to study women's sports like an 11-year-old studies baseball statistics, and I got dangerous in seeing up arrows, up arrows.
Susie Wolf.
When you're competing, you're not thinking about any fear or any worries of what could happen.
Josh Harris.
You can't do a good deal with a bad person.
Jay Batt.
At the end of the day, there's never been a better time to be a student athlete.
And more. Stay tuned.
Jumpstart your trading day on Bloomberg Open Interest.
2 hours of single stock stories that are driving the opening bell action.
We'll take you to Wall Street, Main Street, the C-suite, and beyond.
These are companies that are growing their market.
The great companies in the U.S. are the companies hitting the cutting edge. That's a different story.
Get the inside track on what's buzzing in markets.
With the players who are shaping the narrative.
If you have bad earnings reports, you're going to get punished.
They're not buying what the industry is selling. Join us on Bloomberg Open Interest. Every trading day, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you the latest in tech and AI news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Tom Mackenzie in Paris, and this is Bloomberg.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets? We are basically deep in the European earnings season.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
David Weston, join me for the next generation of Wall Street Week, telling stories
Og
of
du
capitalism
ber
from
ikke de
business,
på
markets, economics, tech, and
du
climate.
ber ikke folk
Each week,
kontakte
we'll
de
go
som
on the road
rekrutterer
to
dem
learn
for
what
å gi
lies
på sport, liksom.
behind the headlines of today, and what will likely be
Men hva
the
er
headlines
det folk sier
tomorrow.
sånn på chatten her?
It's a mission.
It's done nothing but
Uh,
to me. That's an extraordinary sign.
We can be the change that we want to see.
Watch the all-new Wall Street Week.
Hæ?
More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Har fått beskjed om å snakke med de som har rekruttert meg. Jeg skriv på support.
Starz shines in its first report since its separation from Lionsgate. The entertainment company added 500,000
Jeg tror dere må innom den Discorden og innom der litt av og til for å se. For alt er
on
ferdig.
improving margins and streamlining its strategy for original content. Joining us now, I'm pleased to say we have Jeffrey Hirsch,
Nei, jeg begynner bare faen meg å lure,
CEO
altså.
of Starz. Jeffrey, great
Men
to see you
support
in
er greit.
person.
Ok,
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here this morning.
And I have to imagine
Jeg
this
ringte
is
direkte til han
some
tech-kameraten.
validation, a real
Ingen
proof of
skal
concept
gjøre det. Det er et
that
support
Starz
de tar
should be a
med.
standalone business.
Yeah, look, I think the corporation made the right decision to separate the
By the way, jeg er
company
sjokket
and
på gevinsten
put the
også.
value in both the sides of the Lionsgate side and the Star side. I think you're seeing the great decision by the board coming to fruition with the stock price on both sides moving and putting the value in the right place on both companies.
So what is your target audience? I mean, we were just talking a little bit during the break about HBO Max has made a number of changes.
dreit meg
You've,
ned i
worked
halsen.
there
Det
too.
var
So
ikke sånn veldig deilig.
what are you doing at Starz? What's your focus?
Yeah, we're really focused on really two core demos, women and underrepresented audiences. When we launched our OTT product in April of 2016, what we saw was driving our business was women. And so we leaned into that very significantly, and our programming mandate now is narratives for, by, and about women and underrepresented audiences. So shows like Outlander, shows like P-Valley, the Power franchise really leans into that. It's very adult, very R-rated. We don't have any advertising, and so we'll continue to really focus on that. And that makes us a very complementary bundling partner to most of the broad-based streamers out there that you see today. So we think we're really uniquely positioned in a very competitive space today.
So R-rated content, not something that you would pop on at
We used to
home.
call it Skinamax, but that's
Yeah.
that's what you are now, right?
No, I think we're a little more elevated in terms of
I didn't
scripted
mean
dramas,
to.
but I
Alex, jeg har brudd på en stigende triangel her som gir 34 3404 bare på den informasjonen.
Where the story goes naturally, we go there, right? And so we don't
Black Mafia
your family, yes. 50 Cent show, really big show for us. We're excited to have it come back on the service. But for us, you know, the tour, when the natural story goes to certain places, we allow our creators to go there, whereas other services kind of pull them back because they want to put ads against it.
So there's plot, of course. And I mean, you think about Game of Thrones, the best television show of all time, in my opinion, obviously was R-rated.
I hear people in this office saying that about Outlander. I mean, they
Really?
love it.
True,
Yeah.
true.
I mean, Outlander is one of the biggest shows on TV, and We have a prequel coming, which takes us back to 1700 Scotland, and it's the love story about how each of the leads from Outlander's parents met and fell in love. So there's a little bit of a Romeo and Juliet story on one side where it's forbidden clans and they fall in love, and the other side is a World War I story. And so we're really excited about it. But I think all of our shows are, we have 5 shows that do between 9 and 12 million eyeballs a week. Those are some of the biggest shows on TV, and so we're really excited about our content strategy and the place that we play in the whole ecosystem.
This leads nicely to my next question. We heard from your chief financial officer recently on your conference call with analysts saying that you see roughly $700 million of content spending in 2026. Can you give us more detail on that? Is that for some of your existing franchises, your existing shows, or you also are you putting that towards developing new content?
So what's in that number is a combination of our big originals. There's a Lionsgate Pay 1, which is the first movie windows that come to that, and a Universal Pay 2. And we think that the portfolio of content really makes us a very compelling service at our $100 price point. And you saw that in the first quarter numbers. We actually grew the U.S. subscriber base total by almost 2% in the first quarter, which is a really, really good accomplishment in a very competitive space. But we have a programming group. We've got 40 to 50 shows in development at any given time. And as we talked about on the call, we want to go from a 15% profit margin to a 20% profit margin by end of 2028. One of the ways that we get there is actually by turning the slate over and putting new shows on the air that we can own as we separated from Lionsgate. And so ownership economics is really important because season 1s are much cheaper than seasons 5, 6, and 7. Right. And we can also put international sales back into the business, which is another way to net down the cost of a show. And so as we separate, we just announced that we opened 4 writers' rooms in the last couple of weeks on some really compelling shows that I'm excited about. As we start to move into 27, you'll start to see more of our own shows come on the slate.
I imagine, with something like Outlander, you can get people to come and pay $4 a month, which is what your special offer is right now. Can you grow that over time as you have these massive competitors like Netflix, like HBO, or do you have to hold it at a lower level?
Nå closet jeg posisjonen min, og den kommer ikke opp her.
If you think about the old traditional world, Starz was always set up as a cherry on top or an additive to broad-based services. So Comcast for a long time sold Starz on top of expanded basic television. We think that world gets replicated in the digital world, and so we've always positioned ourselves as being a complementary add-on to the broad services like Netflix, like Amazon, like Hulu. And so we will always be priced well below the broad-based services so that we are viewed in the consumer's mind as complementary and not competitive.
Before we let you go, I do want to talk a little bit about your business because I believe you derive about 70% of your revenue from streaming. That leaves about 30% of your company exposed to, cord cutting. So how do you plan to deal with that over time? Is that something that you're trying to whittle down, that 30%?
Look, we really follow the consumer, right? And so as the consumer has shifted from linear to digital, we kind of followed the consumer there. But I think there's a real value in still the linear business today. What's interesting about all of our customers, 80% of all of our customers are either added on or a la carte, which means customers chose Starz. It wasn't we're in a bundle, and so that we see the cord cutting and we're just the natural evolution of cord cutting. People have actually picked Starz because
Nå kan vi bryte ordentlig ned der. Jeg tør ikke shorte noe mer Nasdaq. Jeg tok akkurat gevinster nå.
I actually think that there's a lot of opportunities still in the old traditional world for us as the content continues to roll out, that there's opportunities to grow that business. And actually what we saw at the end of the first quarter was a lessening of the cord cutting loss. Now, it's a little bit of time. I wouldn't claim victory on that yet, but our hope is that loss starts to slow, and that's additive to the long-term health of the business.
All right, Jeff, great having you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Jeffrey Hirsch there, the CEO of Starz. Got to get a quick check of what's going on in markets
Green
right
Support
now.
er shorta 2 hele kontrakter.
Back down. I think Nvidia and some of the other Mag 7 stocks are really holding it up there. We saw most of them gaining, right?
Yeah.
Alphabet, Google was down, but you had Nvidia up as well as Apple and...
Yeah, when you have more than 400 stocks lower, even the might of Nvidia and some of those Magnificent Seven, you can see sort of it comes out in the wash. We're going to get into it next. Don't go anywhere. This is Open Interest.
season is here.
I know it's like your Super Bowl, right?
I can't wait. It's like opening presents in the morning.
All right, it will be exciting.
Nobody covers earnings like Bloomberg.
US tech is influencing global markets.
Technology is driving business across Europe.
Companies in Asia are betting on tech.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sherrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts here in Sydney, where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news, and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering.
We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. Let's get a check on stocks. The first day of June trading down. The S&P 500 off 0.5%. The NASDAQ down 0.25% as the VIX rises up a little bit. Take a look at some of the movers here. NVIDIA, as Katie pointed out, is not enough to undo the damage done by the other 400 stocks that are down right now. Tesla, for example, is down as well. We come back. Raquel Oden joins us of HSBC. She says to expect a wave of earnings upgrades.
DraftKings hit a milestone in the second quarter of 2024. For the first time as a public company, it turned a profit.
Is this a new era for DraftKings?
There's an inflection from when you're cash flow negative and you're operating off of equity raises from the past to when you're self-funded and you're cash flow positive and able to control your destiny a lot more.
You've had your first quarters of profitability now. Does that take pressure off? Does it increase pressure?
I think it increases pressure. I mean, once you start making profits, people expect you to make more, and all of a sudden you're valued on a multiple of those profits as opposed to the theoretical what could be. So very important, I think.
When you're cash flow negative, you've sold a vision of what the company should be working on, and you're very focused on working on that and delivering against that. When you've pivoted to profitability, the world of what you can work on is a little bit open, and there's a lot of different ideas, and it requires more focus than ever to make sure that you are prioritizing on the most important things that are going to deliver the most value.
DraftKings' solid standing in a booming sector gives them the luxury to play the long game. They're not under pressure to cut costs.
When you have really strong revenue growth, you don't need that. If you look at where we are today and where we want to be and where we believe we will be, the vast majority of the incremental EBITDA is not coming from any cost reduction.
We don't feel like we need to cut costs because we're growing our revenue so much. We want to grow our revenue into our existing cost structure. And there's no need to reduce the costs as long as we're being efficient with what we allow cost growth to look like.
Det er en god nyhet som skjedde akkurat nå. Alle posisjoner vil bli resatt. De sa det var en teknisk feil på fredag. Det var en ansatt som ikke hadde tørt å gitt beskjed. Det var en ansatt som hadde hatt pølsefingre på fredag og slettet alle posisjonene på pocket-traderne på plattformen, som ikke tørte å innrømme at de hadde gjort en feil. Så de fikk akkurat beskjed nå. Så det er veldig, veldig bra. Det er så sykt. Tenk ikke tørre da. Han var sikkert ny på jobb. Tenk deg ha for kjeft da. Ta gevinsten her da. Tenk deg da. Trykket på alle på plattformen. Det ble dyrt. Ta gevinsten her nå. Det opp 2.500 her. Jeg tilbake nå, boys.
Sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez.
The
court appearance is scheduled in Colorado today for a man accused of using a makeshift flamethrower to lob Molotov cocktails at a group of demonstrators honoring Israeli hostages in Gaza. CBS's Anna Schechter.
The FBI said the suspect yelled "Free Palestine." Multiple videos posted to social media showed the suspect shouting, "We need to end Zionists."
8 people were injured.
Jeg må ta sånn e-books, jeg har alltid hjertet mitt, det ikke farlig. Faen, jeg bæsjer meg hele meg. Du litt for frisk nå, Gustav. Nå du veldig ivrig. Du tar PC-en min, du driter på meg I nakken.
Just in from Washington, the Supreme Court is declining to hear for now a challenge to an assault weapons ban. The case from Maryland
Så alle de som har vært på Shortman som har ventet lenge, vi kommer I morgen nå. Vent og se. Jeg må bare ta noen piller der.
A second round of Russia-Ukraine peace talks has ended almost as soon as it began. It came a day after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced what he called a brilliant drone operation that devastated Russia's Air Force. CBS's Ramy Inocencio.
He said Ukraine managed to launch over 100 drones, that each one was flown by its own drone operator, and that they were launched from inside Russia, targeting 5 air bases across the country.
Senate Republicans are back in Washington with hopes of passing what the president calls one big, beautiful budget bill. A GOP holdout, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. Politico's Mia McCarthy.
He's a big deficit hawk. He has, really pushed for having bills that don't increase the deficit and has been very consistent in voting against legislation that does.
A former Trump loyalist in Idaho is fighting to return her January 6th pardon. CBS's Steve Catham.
Pamela Hemphill is one of more than 1,500 people Trump pardoned earlier this year for their roles in the Capitol insurrection. She has sought help from her Republican senator to formally refuse and block the Trump pardon issued back on January 20th.
Hemphill tells CBS News, "We were guilty, period." A giant plume of dust from the Sahara Desert is floating over the Atlantic on its way to the U.S. CBS's Rob Marciano on Captiva Island.
It's over Puerto Rico. Actually, air quality issues are poor there. It'll probably come over South Florida as well over the next couple of days. So it brings its own issues. But the good news with the dust, it does knock down hurricane activity.
This is CBS News.
Nå jeg glad. Tralalala. Da har vi dratt inn 3 lapper. Jeg skal kjøpe gull etterpå, men gull har gått litt mye før det her. Jeg veldig glad, for jeg var redd for at det var noe gærent med plattformen. Men her en menneskelig feil som har dritt seg ut, så jeg synes det var veldig ordentlig. Så alle de posisjonene som ble sikkert kjøpt og solgt på fredag, de blir fikset til nå. Da ble jeg veldig happy. Jeg har dratt inn nå
Matt Piper,
Ja,
CBS
$300
News.
This
nå.
may be
Det var-
true. But a new study from Iran finds kissing can lead to depression and anxiety. Researchers there claim those two conditions can trigger the release of the stress hormone cortisol, which in turn can disrupt the delicate balance of bacteria
Mathias,
in your
nå er det
mouth.
trygt.
The study was of 268
Jeg
newlywed
tror jeg var opp
previous ones have shown as many
16%
as
på
80
bare
million
fredag
bacteria
på
are
gul.
transferred in a 10-second kiss.
Nei, men ikke følg meg ennå. Gi det en ukes tid til, for jeg skal ta ut masse penger fra kontoen min. Vent litt til.
This is Bloomberg
Jeg har
Intelligence
20 000 stående på konto. Jeg har nå 150.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fat?
One person's chaos is another person's animal spirits.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like
I'll
the
talk to you,
M&A that
Daniel.
we've seen?
Are people just too exuberant out there?
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
Good Monday morning from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City to our
Har dere tjent mye penger på gull? På meg forrige uke?
Well, John Tucker just asked the best question. Why is oil up? I've been asking this all morning.
Det er 8-3 da.
Short covering.
Nei. Det er 8-10 3 hver dag, var det ikke?
Jo, men jeg har tjent så mye penger på gull.
I'm going to wait till Alex still gets in and tell me why oil's up. So there you go. All right, we got
Ja, så startet du med litt store posisjoner også.
Susan Spence, chair of the ISM.
Ja, ikke sant?
Manufacturing data come out again today, fourth month.
I helvete, jeg dro den 50 000 på fredag.
Global economy reporter on the global trade tensions out there.
alle dager.
Autos editor Susan
Jeg
Tesla
trykte jo feil i natt. Skal du se, for jeg var med på gullet opp, og så shortet jeg på toppen her, og så skulle jeg legge inn 0,05, og så la jeg inn 0,5.
Du fikser det, Rosny.
Og hva med ned?
Ja, jeg vet ikke hva jeg skal si. Hva skjer med Bloomberg Service? Skal du begynne å trene altså? Yes, Marsko, men bare vent litt. Nå var det så close til 10%. Nei, ikke rør noen ting, OK? De skal gjøre alt manuelt. Bare lat som de ikke er der. Bare lat som de ikke er der.
Demand, which is new orders, customer inventory, backlog, and new export orders. 3 of those 4 indicators continue to contract. Backlog and new orders contracted a bit slower this month at a slower rate. New export orders, not surprisingly, took another plunge and accelerated reduction at 3 percentage points lower. So, in our view, the lack of new orders, driven by that uncertain demand from the marketplace, demand the conflicts of who's going
Men kjøper du gull nå, Robert? Har ikke gull gått litt mye I dag, da?
Ja, du var med opp fra $70-80 her. Og det legger opp her, og så saftet jeg meg ut på toppen her, så nå setter jeg meg og venter.
Ja, men teknisk skal de dra opp, eller?
Ja, det tror jeg nok vi skal, men
innenfor dagen? Jeg tror vi skal til 3007, men sånn innenfor dagen.
Ja, så vi går ikke opp I en smell, eller? Så han kommer nok sikkert litt inn igjen, så vi skal ned og teste en diagon nå. Og da har vi jo et alternativ 3370 for eksempel, eller helt ned til 33. Det så små tall på her, jeg ser hjemme at jeg ser jo nesten ikke. Nei, 3370 det laveste, jeg har 3378, ja, 3378 eller 3370. Da vil jeg teste 2 forskjellige diagoner.
For meg nå som kortsiktig ser det som at gull kan vi kan jo falle litt ned nå, ikke sant?
Ja.
Helt ned til
Susan, thank you so much for giving us a couple minutes of your time. Susan Spence, chair for ISM Manufacturing PMI, the Institute of Supply Management.
Ja, det står. Ja, det er bien. Ja, jeg ser det.
Jeg skal kjøpe, jeg må komme litt
Ja, 33,45 men nå et motstandsnivå her.
Ja, veldig, og jeg ser det. Man har litt jobbene her rundt 65.
at IBKR Forecast Trader. The S was recently at 37%. Start predicting today at IBKR.com/forecast. Last trading day for this contract is June 23rd. You just heard from Susan there. The ISM Manufacturing Index continues in contraction territory. Major stock averages lower. Right now, the S&P 500 down 32, the Dow down 315, the Nasdaq 163 points lower. 8 of the 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500 down right now. The exception, energy, is the biggest gainer because Alex.
Men det var droner eller da, for det var droner de hadde smuglet inn i.
China accusing the U.S. of violating the trade deal. President Trump says he's going to double tariffs on steel and aluminum metals. And then we're going to add more geopolitical risk as Russia and Ukraine's peace talks ended.
Ja, jeg lurer jo på
hvorfor sier de OK til langdistansemissiler en uke før de går langt inn i Russland med droner?
Ja, ikke sant.
Det en sammenheng med langt inn i Russland, langdistansemissiler fra Tyskland. Det noe som skjer her.
Ja, de er jo tatt ut helt oppe 14 mil fra norske grenser oppe innom Lokselv der.
Faen til hjertet, ass.
All right, thanks so much. Happy Monday, everybody. Alex Steele here.
Og så fikk med seg gulltreden, da.
What's your name, John Tucker?
Sahar.
All right.
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
What's your name?
At least he didn't call you Charlie Pellet.
Ja, en lång fra... Nei, 308.
All right, let's take a look at some of the stocks on the move.
Og sa du noe, sikkert?
We're joined now by Bloomberg's Anita Sikova.
Jeg longa den i natt, sier jeg. Jeg longa fra 308.
Ja, da har du gjort en jævla kul, eller hadde du ikke så stor posisjon?
Jeg har gjort over 100%.
Dritbra da. Fy faen på brystet, ass.
But it's coming on back of an
upgrade
from Bank of America, which upgraded
Da det på tide å roe ned litt.
and actually currently their target price is the highest on the
Hvor greier skal ta meg kvarter, eller?
$260 price tag.
Ja.
Bank of
Det ikke noe farlig, jeg bare fikk jævlig hjerte. Jeg har sånn hjertemedisin-drit. Jeg har det hjertegreiene mine, vet du. Jeg tilbake snart, jeg bare setter meg litt ned. Det ikke noe stress. Det bare gjør veldig vondt. Jeg bare la alt være på.
For Trump administration, they mentioned a few examples, including the deal with Qatar Airways and also China ending their ban on airlines taking deliveries from Boeing. And clearly, this is one winner emerging. We had earlier this year Boeing winning this contract from the government. There are also some fundamental reasons in the note. They're quoting progress in stabilizing production. And overall, this is boosting the stock. The stock is up 20% year to date, which, as we remember, last year was pretty rough. So quite a revival there.
It's all about deliveries of the 737. That's what George Ferguson told me, and that drives the cash flow. So hopefully they can continue to ramp up production there. How about Moderna?
Yeah, another move higher on vaccines. Obviously, those stocks have been
markedet går ingen
plass.
Det går opp og ned.
They had about 5% jump in early trading. Now we're seeing about 2%. This comes after the drug maker won FDA approval for its second-generation COVID vaccines. So 2 groups. Adults over 65 and anyone over 16 who has at least one risk factor for severe disease. It's interesting that initially the reaction was very positive, and we see that some of the analysts are weighing on this, that maybe it's not that big of an improvement. For example, William Blair says the approval is incremental win for Moderna, and obviously with Robert F. Kennedy in the administration, there is a lot of obstacles for vaccine makers. And also they say does not see the approval of new vaccine as a massive boost to sales, which obviously is important. That said, people were prepared for way worse developments for vaccines, and so far we're seeing some positive lights there. So we've seen a lot of jumps up, and obviously some retracement, some volatility down as well.
All right, Denitsa, we really appreciate Denitsa Sikova joining us. For more conversation just like this one, subscribe to our Stock Movers Reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen. All right, global trade tensions back in the front and center. That's what we keep hearing. And the current Bloomberg Global Economy reporter joins us now. I would argue maybe the trade tensions never left the front burner, but nevertheless, do we feel like the escalation between, say, U.S. and China is real, or is it just bluster?
It's just like, you know, the latest episode in an ongoing kind of drama, really, Alex. But your point, at the very least, it does show that we had that kind of cooling off meeting in Geneva.
Så begynner på sånn som i natt nå.
They agreed to bring down tariffs on each other and sort of set out a pathway for talks on working out some of the other issues. But in the time since then, of course, we've had a couple of things going on. On the one hand, the US clearly not happy with the state of progress in those talks, not happy that China aren't really...
Man gikk jo rett opp I beåpning I går for det.
And in particular, we had this from the Commerce Ministry overnight. They're making the point that the US is pushing ahead with export controls, AI, chip software, and of course that big move on student visas, in particular the threat to revoke student visas of Chinese students that was announced last week. And by the way, we also have, of course, on the geopolitical front, the warning from the Defense Secretary in Singapore over the weekend that China continues to have ambitions towards Taiwan. None of this suggests a kind of a smooth or linear pathway to reaching any kind of a near-term trade agreement that would diffuse all of these tensions, and that seems to be what's bubbling up again.
We being the United States,
Nei, altså, hovedtargeten var jo 361, som den traff
it's a little bit complicated at the moment, given the court ruling last week, which has certainly clouded some of this, but nonetheless, I think the messaging seemed to be from the administration that in truth they were dealing with some big trading partners on the European side, and of course we had that initial agreement with the UK, and then the big Asia exporters, trading nations, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam and the like, and obviously the China talks that seemed to be the focus. I mean, I think the messaging was that they're not literally dealing with every country in the world. They're trying to get some big ones off the block. The question mark becomes how much leverage does the US lose or not lose on account of that court ruling last week on many of those tariffs that were imposed in the first instance. There are those who say what country would want to come to the negotiating table and give concessions while that court process plays itself out. Obviously, the US administration makes the point that that is immaterial to what it's trying to achieve anyway, and even if the court's process fails, then they have other routes to go in terms of imposing tariffs. But nonetheless, at the very least, it is a confusing additional point to this, as the US does try to achieve some kind of trade agreements with major trading partners in the near term.
Right. It also wonders, too, are we going to see carve-outs as we keep getting specific industry tariffs, like with the steel and aluminum? Like, do we get more carve-outs as then trade negotiations continue?
Well, that's the expectation. It's going backwards and forwards. Of course, last week we had the surprise announcement of the increase in tariffs on steel and aluminium to 50%, for example. President Trump making it clear that he remains, that he has the authority to move when he wants to in some of these matters. And we still expect
kursmål på 34,29 I tillegg der.
Maybe pharmaceuticals, maybe on semiconductors, maybe on lumber, maybe on other areas.
34,29.
Of course, certain industries will be exemptions in carbon. We've already seen that on the consumer electronics coming out of China, for example. We've seen it on some other products as well. Every trading partner coming to the table will have their special plead, their special begging bowl in all of this. So ultimately, there will be some exemptions, Alex.
All right, Enda, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Enda Curran, a global economy reporter, joining us. Always love the insight. Thanks very much. All right, coming up, Craig Trudell, Bloomberg Autos reporter globally on Tesla sales plunging. Also, higher steel tariffs? That cannot be good. Some of the automakers are going to break that down. Happy Monday. This is Bloomberg.
Fed snakker. Target gull 35 000. Nei, det er 3500.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker, the Bloomberg News with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and we are being brought to you by Oracle. Attention growing businesses, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This is for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitments. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. So at the top of the hour, we got the manufacturing data. It wasn't great. ISM factory activity contracted in May for a fourth consecutive month. You also had that gauge of imports. That was an eye popper, falling to a 16-year low. That's pushing stocks lower. One of the factors pushing stocks lower. S&P 500 down 24 points right now, down 0.4%. We're at 58.87 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 248 points. The Nasdaq 100 44 points lower. 2-year yield up a basis point, 390. 10-year up 3 basis points, 442. The long bond up just about 3 basis points, still under 5, 496 there. Energy, best performing major industry group. The price of crude oil jumping roughly 3%. That's West Texas. Bristol Myers Squibb will pay BioNTech as much as $11.1 billion to license a next generation cancer drug. The competition really intensifying in an area of oncology that seeks to harness the immune system to attack tumors. And here's one for you. I don't think you're going to like this one, Paul. Amtrak's Northeast Quarter will see a drop in grant funding under President Trump's new proposed budget request. So the administration is proposing a roughly 25% decrease for Amtrak in the Northeast Quarter.
Why?
I'm going on a Acela down to D.C. today. So I'll be on it. I'll report back.
The last time I took it, it was cheaper actually to fly out of LaGuardia.
I'm not flying into D.C.
No.
There's no way I'm flying into Reagan for multiple
Michael
reasons.
McKee can do that, but
regular
people no.
There's lots of reasons why that's not a thing.
I flew in once, and we were in a small plane, and they told us the tower, you got to come in. There's somebody behind you. Got to come in faster.
Yeah.
Because there's a big jet behind you. So we had to keep the landing gear up at the last second. And I turned to the pilot. I said, the landing gear isn't down.
Right.
Last second, it locked in place and we landed.
Yeah. See,
if I hadn't been there, Alex.
There you go. Who knows what would have happened? All right, John Tucker, Alex Steele here alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. One headline that's catching everyone's eye right now is Tesla sales plunging 67%, almost a 3-year low in France. Craig Trudell is Bloomberg Global Autos reporter, joins us now. Hey, Craig, what's the reason behind this?
Yeah, the association that reports these numbers doesn't necessarily give manufacturer by manufacturer analysis, but I think what's really stark here is just how sort of consistently bad Tesla's numbers have been in France this year, and how that has continued even as the company has rolled out a redesigned version of the Model Y. So there was a lot of sort of concern about the damage that Elon Musk was doing to Tesla's brand early this year, but also some people who said, well, hang on a second, they're redoing their most important vehicle. Let's allow that to, sort of hit the market and see how the company fares. Once it has that arrow in its quiver, it now has that vehicle to sell, and registrations are still slumping mightily. For the company to post its worst sales yet this year in May is really alarming if you're sort of concerned about, just how many cars this company is selling in what is, a pretty significant EV market. It's the second biggest in the EU.
Craig, I mean, if this is in fact political fallout, Mr. Elon Musk, is there a plan from the company to turn things around there?
I think the fact that Musk is stepping back from the Trump administration, at least to some degree, there is a lot of optimism that could help matters. I think the other sort of side of that argument may be to sort of take Musk and Trump and JD Vance at their words when they say that he's not really actually leaving, right? And do we sort of think that he's actually going to step back from U.S. politics in a meaningful way? Do we think he's going to sort of change his tune with respect to European politics, where he continues to sort of insert himself into say Germany or the UK? I think he's been less specific about French politics, although he joke at the president's expense last week when he was asked about what happened with his black eye, right? And so those sorts of slights probably don't go over well with consumers in these markets. And there are other sort of more serious criticisms that he's leveled about say U.S. funding of European defense that I think rub a lot of people the wrong way.
På 1,68 på Fibonacci,
Well, I gotta say though, if I take a look at the chart, it was really February of 2024 where sales had a big decline, and Musk was like nowhere in the picture in relation to U.S. politics.
Yeah, no, and I do think that it's important to note that Tesla's sales tend to be very up and down per the chart in our story today, where toward the beginning of each quarter they tend to fall off from the end of the last month of each quarter. And so it's important not to read too much into like the month-to-month moves for this company, but what you see in our chart today is that this is a downward trend that even when you saw a recovery in March, the last month of the first quarter, that recovery was to levels that were far below
Broadcom som på går til all-time high her nå.
In the end of quarters throughout last year or in 2023.
All right, Craig, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it as always. Craig Judell, Bloomberg Global Autos editor, talking a little bit about
Broadcom går til all-time high rett under nå.
Mr. Musk has acknowledged in the past. Let's talk entrepreneurship. Is it a tough time to be an entrepreneur these days or not? Mike Lazaro, Cass Lazaro, authors of Shoveling Bleep, a love story about the entrepreneur's messy path to success. Cass, Mike, thanks so much for joining us here. Cass, how easy, how tough is it to be an entrepreneur today, to raise capital, to get ideas to the marketplace? How is the environment?
Satt en liten short her nå på Satt en liten short her nå på Nasdaq. Jeg venter med å kjøpe gull. Jeg tror gull kan gå mer opp, men jeg vil bare ha den litt ned først før jeg kjøper mer.
The least number of employees. So now is the
time.
First of all, why did you guys decide to write the
book?
So what was the goal behind it?
Ja, litt bedre nå. Eller, hva faen jeg? Ja, det gjorde veldig vondt å stå.
Well, we wrote the book because we've done over 100 investments.
Det ble kjempeplutselig, eller det?
Ja, det var plutselig jævla vondt.
It's how do you pick a co-founder? How do you greenlight ideas? How do you...
Jeg vet ikke hvorfor, ass.
Like culture that people just love. So how do you pivot from things that really well?
Fikk så vondt her og opp I øret og sånt. Det var sånn, helt sånn summert. Det var litt dritt da.
Thank you. You made it. In a book. And so what it is our love story to entrepreneurs, and really the 50 cheat codes we wish we knew when we first started out.
Guess what's the fundraising market like today? If I go to Sand Hill Road and
du enig, Stig, at får vi gull ned mot sånn 3,50-ish, så kjøper vi gull?
It's tough market right now. Money is definitely tight.
Eller du long gull ennå?
Jeg long ennå, ja.
Ok, ja, du sitter I samme posisjon.
Ja, jeg har en sånn liten konkurranse gående på min, hvor den personen som vinner får profiten.
What do you think is the biggest misconception
that
we have right now in the entrepreneurs? So I'm like a 25-year-old kid and I want to get into this business.
It's glory. It's all glory. I can work whatever hours I want. I'll travel all around the world. Oh yeah, and that there's shortcuts.
They legit think this.
Yes.
Okay.
Literally.
Well, social media has done that. You open up social media, you have, you know, guys who are driving Lamborghinis but living in their parents' basement, and so there's this glorification of the hustle culture. We have been a 30-year overnight success story, so we have gotten to work. We've shoveled, you know what, every day, and it's about working smart but working hard. And there's virtue in that hard work, which we wanted to, you know, create an ode to in our book.
So, what are some of the businesses that have crossed you guys' desks in the last year, 2, 3 that have kind of had your attention?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so we invest in all types of stuff. Liquid Death, we were the first investor, which is a water company.
That was a weird one because I'm sitting there at the supermarket looking at this. And, what is it? Is it booze? Is it?
I think that's exactly the point.
Yes.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
It's a wellness product that's marketed like something that's bad for you, right?
Powell skal prate I dag.
We look
Pavel.
at the size of the market when we invest.
Jay Powell skal snakke.
Company created in a tiny market.
Får vi se da hva han sier, for han ble presset av Trump forrige uke til å sette ned
And
renta.
the founder is incredible, the best marketer we've ever met, who worked for our good friend Gary Vaynerchuk, and you know, we knew him. And so that's on one side. The other side is we're looking at a lot of AI stuff, and one of the most exciting companies that came across our desk is a company called Etched, which has a chip that's 10 times faster than NVIDIA's fastest chip, but only does one thing, language models. Started by 3 Harvard dropouts who are also Thiel fellows, and you know, just raised its public at a $1.5 billion valuation. It's still way too expensive compute.
Snakker du om en chip som kjappere enn alle Nvidia sine chipper, den basert på språk?
They're on a mission to make it, to democratize compute for the world's developers.
How long does one have to shovel bleep until it gets a little easier?
I would say forever. Like literally, this is all, the game of entrepreneurship is about reps, right? So there's no shortcuts. There's ways to avoid stepping in it, but this is about reps. So Mike and I have, you know, done this for the last 30 years. We've started 8 companies.
Starta du Nasdaq nå, Joakim?
Akkurat nå,
You know, experience in doing things a little bit faster.
Jeg har gjort det 3 ganger. Jeg har gjort
like this is 24/7.
150 poeng.
Ja, det ligger på 61-80 på Fibonacci.
Så du kan bekrefte at det smart?
Det smart.
Helt til Donald Trump kommer med en tweet. It's all perfect!
Da snurrer vi Fibonacci.
Da går vi om.
We're talking to a lot of nonprofits.
Du ikke I vei, eller?
And you look
Nei, jeg jo veldig for å kjøpe gull I dag, men den har gått litt mye allerede, så jeg må ta den på vei ned, liksom. Hvis folk lurer på hvorfor ikke jeg kjøper gull nå, så fordi jeg må vente, den har gått litt mye I dag.
It's the uncertainty of where is the next dollar going to come from, which if you're in a lab, we want people in labs to continue working in labs. We don't want them raising money, and so once you kind of pull the funding, it's a difficult life for people who want to change the world.
It makes stuff like what you guys do all the more important because you need someone to step in and do that. What a pleasure. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thanks for
Cass and Mike Lazaro joining us, authors of Shoveling Bleep, a story about the entrepreneur's messy path to success. The book comes out tomorrow, and we are looking forward to that. Are you impressed we got through this whole segment while saying Shoveling Bleep?
Yeah, we did.
Because I am.
Exactly.
Our producer was very scared, so I think we should get some props for this one.
Exactly.
Thanks, guys.
Also, co-founders of golf.com, which is where I spend a ton of time.
Do you really?
Crazy. Why?
Hard break. We gotta go. This is Bloomberg.
Alt som ble fikset av 90 Problems.
Har vi ikke fått fiksa den, ja?
Nei, det var ikke teknisk. De fant ut av nå i sted at det var... Jeg bare, hva? Det en ansatt som har trykket på en knapp som heter Close All. Så det var på kryss av alle plattformene som bruker deres LP. Så det var... Jeg tror noen har tatt et jævla svært tap nå.
Au.
Hæ?
Au.
Au, ja.
Startet han ferien tidlig, eller?
Altså, for det jo over 100 000 brukere.
Ja.
Og hvis du da trykker Close All på samklaren, så kan du tenke deg hvor stort tap det der blir. Fytti.
Ja, da får du ferie tidlig.
Ikke bare veldig, han får ferie resten av livet, tror jeg.
Kommer en ferie.
Og så vi bare, for vi sendte en sånn der, eller ikke jeg da, men de på support, for jeg skjønte jo ingenting. Og så de bare får svar, det ikke noe gærent, det ikke noe gærent, de ser ikke at det noe gærent. Jeg bare, jo, jeg har ikke trykket på, jeg har ikke closet posisjonene, jeg tror det skal til helvete liksom, jeg har ikke closet han. Jo, her alt riktig. Jeg bare, nei, alt feil, det noe gærent liksom, jeg har ikke trykket på det. Så bare, jo, det må du ha gjort liksom. Bare, nei, jeg har ikke gjort det. Så jo, nei, for helvete, jeg har ikke gjort det. Og så bare beklager så mye, men det en ansatt som ikke tørte å innrømme det før nå, for de fant sikkert IP-en hans, eller det faen hvordan man gjør dette her. Men de fant ut av hvem det var da, som hadde trykket Close All Positions. Kan le av det nå, men det var faen ikke kult på fredag.
Ja, sånn det.
Og Geir jo!
Hei, Geir.
Hei, ja.
Halla!
Ja. Jeg gjorde ei kule på morgenen i dag, jeg closet dem selv.
På gull, eller?
Og jeg våkna i dag morges, og det var jo en haug med sånne shorter.
Åja, ja.
Ja, så alt står i grønt, så da bare trykket jeg dem ut, jeg.
Ja, da gjør du en kule.
Ja.
Ja, men det bra. Mye har du tjent da?
Neida, jeg tok dem ut på 2,5 på hver av dem.
Ja, ok.
Så det ble 40, tror jeg.
Ja, men det bra det. Det en fin start. Den knappen burde vel egentlig ikke eksistert. Jo, for de har en sånn knapp som du må ha, for hvis det et eller annet som skjer, så må du ha mulighet til å close alle posisjoner. Nå går jeg pluss på shorten min. Fy faen. Men Geir, var det du som var her i stad, eller? For jeg trodde det var deg, men jeg måtte kjøre så hardt i jobben, så jeg så ikke om det var deg. Det var deg, eller?
Ja, det var meg som kjørte opp i går, da.
Ja, for jeg bare var jævlig usikker, men så som du kjørte til nabo, og jeg tenkte, nei, hva faen er det nå, så bare dro jeg.
Nei, jeg måtte kjøre så du kom frem.
Ja, for jeg faen skulle beskjed, vet du, for jeg var tilbake, jeg måtte helt til Oslo.
Ja, nei da, det gikk fint, ja. Ja, det gikk fint.
Ja, det bra. Ja, nå kommer jeg bort på fjerde shorten her. Jeg skal kjøpe gull etterpå, som jeg sier. Jeg må ha den under 3,350 for å kjøpe gull. Det spørs om den vil komme ned i det hele tatt.
Det morsommere å trade gull, altså, når du gjør det.
Ja, jeg visste ikke at jeg tjente så mye penger på gull på fredag, for jeg så det nå. Plutselig så har kontoen min økt med 50 000. For jeg gjorde litt beregningsfeil på fredag, for det viste at det 10 ganger så høye transaksjoner enn det på indekser. Så jeg satt der og bare, er det 0,01? Er det 0,1? Er det 1? Hva det egentlig for noe? Jeg tradet så mye på både torsdag, fredag og lørdag, nei, på onsdag, torsdag, fredag. Så det virker som at oppskriften å trade gull. I hvert fall når Nasdaq og alt så preget av Trump.
Jeg satt i Stockholm og bare så at det ble masse. Og det var fint, det.
Skal du Stockholm?
Nei, jeg var i Stockholm fra torsdag til lørdagskveld.
Med hvem?
Med hvem?
Det hemmelig?
Nei, jeg var ikke alene.
Energy producers in big tech, that's climbing right now. U.S. Steel, aluminum shares, they're surging as President Trump's pledge to double levies on the metals.
Det ble champagne på Stureplan, for å si det sånn.
Steel Dynamics right
now,
the best performers in the S&P 500 in terms of index points. That's 11.2.
Nei, Stig drakk hjemmebrent, så jeg så på han og følte at jeg drakk litt sånn.
Those shares right now 5% higher. Lolly Akiner, meantime, at eToro says
det var ikke noe hjemmebrent her.
Nei, jeg har aldri vært på Stockholm, jeg. På byen.
Det er kjempefint.
Er det bra?
Ja, veldig bra. Det er en kjempebra storby.
Nei, jeg har aldri bare vært i Oslo. Det gikk det rolig for seg, det var mye action.
Nei, ja, bare kos og champagne og god mat.
Ikke noe foxtrott og pistoler og bomber og sånn?
Nei, helt stille og rolig.
Kjedelig. Dere må se den dokumentaren her, den er jævla fet. Jeg skal vise den til dere i chatten, hvis dere synes sånt er litt spennende. Dette er dokumentar en svensk dokumentar. Du blir ganske fengslet. Så skjønner du hvorfor svenske kriminelle kan holde på. Den dokumentaren her er jævla bra. Du må digge den. Du må digge den her. Den her.
Oh, well, Paul keeps them in business, yeah.
Favorite every afternoon
right here. So,
anyway, we check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your
Nei, pluss på shortene. Skal se hvor langt ned går. Jeg tror du skal bryte ned 301 og sikkert tappe nede på 260-ish. Kommer gull sikkert å stikke videre opp da. Faen, ass.
Search Bloomberg Originals, and that's where you'll find
the
video feed. Last time we saw Sam Fazeli, who's the director of research and does some of the healthcare stuff for Bloomberg
Intelligence.
Come to
Papa.
He was here in New York, and he was on his way to Chicago
Come
to some conference where a lot of these healthcare folks get together and they talk about new drugs and new therapies.
Der, ja.
There's going to be some news coming out of that. He right. Sanofi buying immunology biotech.
Faen, hvor mye penger man egentlig tjener bare man treffer litt, ass.
Bristol to pay BioNTech up to $11 billion for a cancer deal. Moderna's getting some new news, so we got to get Sam here. He's still in Chicago. He's at our Chicago office.
Jeg har dratt inn en månedslønn nå, bare på onsdag til fredag.
Some deals today in the healthcare space.
Det er bra. Ja, bare på gull, altså. Det er Nasdaq-greiene er bare piss I forhold.
Pretty substantial.
Yeah, well, it's more than I have in the back of my sofa, if you like, and the little change that you find there. But the sector needs these. I mean, we've had a drought of deals since Johnson & Johnson did intracellular therapeutics. And then we've got this deal now, and the sectors, as I'm sure you've talked about, and we've talked about, has been under pressure because of all the new issues that are being created for them.
Jeg må ha under 300, så får vi fart ned mot 60, 260, 260. Jeg skal kjøre masse mer gull. Jeg må bare ha den litt ned nå. Det har gått litt for mye opp, synes jeg.
Assuming we don't get another round of tariffs for pharma drugs and most favored nation conversations turning up, it might be the beginning of a little renaissance in deal making.
What was the absolute coolest thing that you learned over the weekend? I mean, I was floored yesterday. I was sitting and thinking of you and reading like all these amazing articles coming out about these amazing new drugs that could have tremendous effect on cancer, for example. What was the coolest thing you heard?
So, Alex, there's been some continued evolution and increase in opportunities in breast cancer. So AstraZeneca had 2 presentations yesterday at what they call plenary sessions, and that's one of the key areas where, I mean, the room gets packed with 10,000 people or whatever the number is. And so they had an update on a breast cancer drug which is continuing to further expand the options that patients, when it gets approved, if it gets approved, patients have in treating that disease, which has become something that
Vi ser på olika platser där han håller sig gömd.
the worst kind of it can live with for
Han
quite
säger
some time now.
att han vill berätta allt.
Also from them on gastric disease, gastroesophageal junction disease, which is not one of the, it's a bad one, and there's not been many therapies there. So that was a really good, very good data set, I have to say, practice changing. And there's a whole host of phase 1, phase 2 early stage drugs that look really good. So I'm going to be coming to this conference for, I don't know how many more years, because it's going to keep developing.
Bristol paying BioNTech up to $11.1 billion for a cancer deal. What's going on there?
Yeah, up to is the operative word. The actual guaranteed cash is about $3.5 billion. So about $1.5 billion right up front, and then when the deal closes, and then by 2028 another $2 billion that's not contingent on any, they're just anniversary payments. So that's pretty good, given that they acquired the asset amongst a whole host of other stuff from a Chinese biotech company acquisition, Biotheus, only a few months ago. And it's in a new class of drugs that people have got excited about. There's Merck that did a deal. There's Summit and Akeso. Pfizer just did a deal last week, paying $1.2 billion for a drug in development, which we quite like the data for that was presented here. So these are drugs that are trying to push the barrier of what we've been able to achieve with what's called immunotherapy. Can you do better? Can you push more patients to survive longer using these drugs?
What about, oh wow, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, it was there, it was so brilliant, and then it went away. Oh, I know,
Moderna.
Funding, here's my brilliant point. Government funding for universities that have big medical units. Like, what were people saying about that?
Yeah, they're not happy. I've talked to a lot of people here, and even my, interestingly, an Uber driver that I had who just doubles up. She works in a lab that does genomic analysis for scientists at Northwestern University here in Chicago. She said she's noticing a palpable slowdown in the requests she's getting to do analysis of laboratory analyses because people are uncertain. It's even got to my Uber driver, which is sad. No, it is a problem. People are worried, and we'll have to see whether philanthropists can fill the gap.
Sam, so from your conference there in Chicago, is the key focus still cancer, or is there other parts of healthcare that are getting as much, I guess, attention?
Yeah, but so this is a cancer conference.
Og shorte guller opp, Robert. Hva sier du til det? Det litt sånn skummelt, eller?
Palpable increase in the number
Shorte?
of
Ja, her nå.
scientists and companies. Yeah, every year it's got more and more, which is expected. They've been funding research significantly for the past 15, 20 years, and this is the fruits of it. The next conference that's coming up is also, I don't think it's in Chicago, but it's over here somewhere in the US, is the American Diabetes. That's where you get all the obesity, liver disease kind of data that we're also...
bra.
Thanks so much for joining us. As always, Sam Fazeli, Director of Research for Global Industries and Senior Pharmaceuticals Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's based in London, but he's...
Men han har jo nettopp brutt et nivå her da, så...
I was just mentioning a cancer conference, and where a lot of the latest science is presented. So, and for investors, it's really important to think about how which things, which I guess therapies and drugs you want to finance and support.
Does Sam not have the coolest job? Like, media is really cool, we all love it. Energy is really cool, we all love it. But like his stuff like changes the world.
Satt en short bare for testen for å se om han korrelerer med Nasdaq eller ikke.
Yeah, which is fantastic. We love that. All right, well, speaking of energy, talk about changing the world. Coming up next, we're going to speak to the CEO of Tay Technologies. Tay Technologies is a nuclear fusion.
Jeg har lyst til å kjøpe gull, men jeg vil ha lenger ned, så faen, da kan jeg ikke bare shoppe.
And that could be huge. It would be...
Tokamak reactor?
What?
Hike?
What kind of design is the reactor?
I don't know.
Ja, jeg tenker, hvis den går ut det beltet mellom de to nivåene jeg har her nå, tar den ut det første kursmålet, vet du.
Ja, for jeg tror Nasdaq skal gå videre ned nå. Jeg tror gull skal gå opp, men jeg bare penger på shorten. Det veldig lite da. For meg så ser det teknisk ut som det skal litt ned noe gull. Hvis den så bra teknisk som den har vært hele uka, så får jeg veldig penger på den nå, tenker jeg. Vi får se. Det så liten posisjon, så ikke noe. Det bare for å være med.
Ja, det ligger noen og topper av. Litt bakover her, ser jeg altså.
Faen, det vondt i brystet, ass. Helvete.
Da tar det 5 minutter, hvis du dårlig.
Ja, vente litt.
Jeg trenger det litt til, for å si det sånn.
Det ikke noen grunn til at jeg skal ha sånt i brystet. Jeg har ikke gjort noen ting, egentlig. Jeg har ikke Kajanne, Petter. Stig og Robert, kan dere være hvis jeg tar litt jeg har veldig vondt i brystet, så jeg blir nesten stresset. Hvis jeg slapper av litt, kunne dere bare kjørt løpet litt, eller?
Ja.
Ja, går det, for jeg har vondt i armen og visner liksom, så helt sånn fucka. Nå går shortmene pluss på gull, da. Nei, faen. Jeg tar bare bitte litt pause. Jeg sånn og kråka litt, og så bare ses etterpå.
Ja, da ring på legevakta.
Jeg vil snakkes på. Ha det.
Ha det.